So I know that this is a sensitive subject, and we don't have like leaders in the Republican or Democrat Party that ever want to really address this. And there's nothing, I'm not bringing it up because I want to take away somebody's rights. Let me make that clear. But nobody wants to speak the truth about that the Revolutionary War was as much against the Vatican as it was against the monarchy, because it was the Church of England. Samuel Adams, who was an early founder, said that it was more of a fight against them for him than the Britain taxes. But over time, what's happened, because the media serves at, the seat of Satan there for the Vatican, so does the universities. It's been, made to, the Catholics are persecuted. No, that's not fair. I mean, look, seriously, it's not fair. And I was raised Catholic. My family is Catholic. I'm not Catholic. I don't recognize it. But I recognize it as what it truly is. But to get my family to see it is... But so look, I'm not trying to take anybody's rights here, but I do think that if you're a Christian and you're somebody that has common sense and you're a fair-minded person, then you should be able to recognize, and that's why I said I was raised Catholic, that it wasn't fair to the Protestants. But the Vatican didn't care. The Vatican used its parishioners. That's why it's been flooding our country with Catholics, because that's how it can gain its political dominance here. See, the reason you know that America was created by God is because that's what was happening in Spain, in Europe, in England, was that papacy only came in saying they literally claim that anybody in the Catholic Church they are dominant over. They claim it, but they claim they don't recognize any other Christian religion because they are supremacy. They've said it. They wear more crowns than any other kings, and yet God never raised any of them up. Because they built, and who knows if it's true, built their building on the bones of Peter. That's what they claim. That's how much they misinterpreted the Bible. How much they twisted it. So Thomas Jefferson, John, they wrote extensively about this, and of course they would. This is why the Protestants, God brought them here. That's why you could tell God's hands all over the writings of our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Why was it written the way it was? Because God was like, I'm not going to let that Vatican think it's going to get in here. It's going to try, but I'm going to make sure this Constitution is done so nobody can do what they've been doing all across Europe and everywhere else. And that was wanting to get a hold of kingships, because then they knew it would go down to the next family member. So that's why it got to this point, like for the Scottish Covenanters and the people that came late, like in the 1700s here, it was like, oh, forget fighting it. Even though the Scottish Covenanters, they stood by King James I because I like King James I because he was trying to do the right thing, but in all honesty, he should have got rid of all the Catholic stuff. But he had to think of his constituents. And George Washington did this. He was like, no anti-Catholic stuff. And it's like, well, then if you're going to say that, then you're not allowing people to try to speak the truth, and then nobody's going to be saved. So you're selling out for what this world wants instead of doing what God wants you to do. I get that it's a hard balance. I get it. Because there's tons of innocent people in the Catholic Church. But more and more have entered because there hasn't been people speaking up about this. We don't even have leaders look at J.D. Vance. Does he not know that history? Does he not ever read the writings of any of the early founders? How can you not know this history anyway? It is the whole reason England fell apart was because of the Vatican. So the thing is God gives you this beautiful, great country of independence, right? That's what he did. That's what he created America to be. So he would be your king, because that's what, and is that the reason behind that again is because of Israel. the story in the Old Testament about Israel wanting a king, and God was not happy. So God made this a land where there wouldn't be a king, which is why the Revolutionary War was a just war, but it was against the Vatican as much as it was against the kings of the monarchy. Because God did not want any other king over this country than him. So when you're a Catholic, then you're taking your loyalties. You have a divided loyalty. And the early founders understood this. And that's the reason why near the end of their lives, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they didn't have a lot of hope in the Republic because they saw how that church was just mind-numbing people. And Jefferson wrote about this. How is it that priests can just have this kind of impact over people? You know, like to where they take their faculties of logical thinking away. And he's right. He's right. So that's what's so sad about all of it. That's why yesterday I was crying about it, because I'm like, there's nothing more these men could have done. There's nothing. They did everything. They wrote extensively about this. God used these men to give you all of it. But if you are still going to use your free will to make yourself just be a subject of the foreign power in Rome, then you take everybody's freedom away. Because it's a divided loyalty. God didn't even raise them up. Everything from them is word of mouth. But that's the problem. The early founders knew that church was all word of mouth. There was no evidence for anything they were saying. That's why many of these founders wrote that, why are people just allowing somebody, they're just handing over their mind and letting these people dictate what to believe. Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1814, in every country and in every age, the priest has been hostile to liberty. Listen to this. Thomas Jefferson wrote this in 1820, I think, or 1815. I do not know that it is the duty to disturb by missionaries the religion and peace of other countries. I've questioned this too. All these missionaries that go into other countries and then people get killed, and it's like, I think you're causing the problems. Who may think themselves bound to extinguish by fire the heresies to which we give the name of conversations and quote our own example for it. Were the Pope or his holy allies to send in mission to us some thousand of Jesuit priests to convert us to their orthodoxy, I suspect that we should deem and treat it as a national aggression on our peace and faith. I salute you in the spirit of place and goodwill. See, the problem is that the Pope has given itself more and more authority over time over others. And that's what historically, the doctrine of about the Pope being the supremacy of the worldwide supremacy has developed gradually, with the Pope's role increasing in significance, especially after the fall of Western Roman Empire. The crowning of Charlemagne by Pope Leo III in 800 AD symbolized the Pope's authority to confer political legitimacy to rulers, suggesting an intertwined spiritual and temporal authority. So do you see that? That's how they wield it. And that's going way back then. So then that's the reason they flooded America with Catholics. And then everybody is told, well, that's a Christian religion. No, but they don't. Most every other Christian religion, whether it's Protestant, Presbyterian, they're all worldly now. But, when they weren't. Recognize that, no, there's one king, and we only call one person Father that's within the church, and that's God, because God, that's his domain. He's not going to share it with anybody else. The papacy makes excuses, but the papacy claims a kinship-like authority over the church and regards itself as the unifying appointed leader of all Christians of faith. It doesn't matter boundaries or where you're at. It is the king. So then you have a divided loyalty to America and Rome.